ship fell from the sky on a Tuesday morning. It did not crash the way meteors do, burning and wild and out of control. No, it came down slow, almost lazy, like someone tossing a bag of trash out of a car window. It dropped through the clouds over the Sahara Desert, shook the ground for 200 miles in every direction, and then it just sat there, half buried in the sand, silent, enormous. 14 kilometers of dark metal stretching across the dunes like the spine of some dead god. Every satellite on Earth turned to look at it. Every government scrambled. Every news channel lost its mind. But the thing that scared people the most was not the size of it. It was the message. 3 hours after the ship landed, a small probe in orbit around Earth sent a transmission. It took the best linguists in the world 9 days to decode it. When they did, nobody wanted to release it to the public. The message was short. It said, "Enjoy our garbage, soil dwellers. May it keep you busy while you last." It was not an invasion. It was not a greeting. It was an insult. Someone out there in the stars had looked at Earth and decided it was nothing more than a dumping ground. They had thrown away a broken ship the way a person throws away a dead phone. They did not even bother to watch it land. The world reacted the way the world always reacts. Some people panicked, some people prayed, some people got angry, and some people got curious. Dr. Lena Vasquez was one of the curious ones. She was a theoretical physicist from Miami, 41 years old, with dark hair she never remembered to brush, and a habit of talking to herself when she was thinking hard. The United Nations pulled her out of a university lab and put her in charge of a new international project called Ember. Her job was simple on paper and impossible in practice. Figure out what the ship was, figure out how it worked. Figure out if it could be useful. Colonel James Mwangi was put in charge of keeping the whole thing safe. He was Kenyan's Special Forces, tall and quiet, the kind of man who said 10 words a day and made every single one of them count. They set up a military perimeter around the crash site that stretched 50 kilometers in every direction. Nobody got in without his permission. Nobody got out without his knowledge. The first time Lena walked inside the ship, she cried. Not because she was scared, because it was beautiful. Even broken, even dead, the engineering was beyond anything she had ever imagined. The walls were made of an alloy that seemed to shift color depending on the angle of light. The corridors curved in ways that did not follow straight geometry. The reactor at the heart of the ship, cracked open like a split egg, still hummed with a faint energy that made her teeth ache. The reactor had a fracture running through its core that leaked strange radiation. The weapon systems along the belly of the ship had melted into a single fused lump of slag. The navigation system was dark. The engines were cold. By whatever standards the aliens used, this ship was dead and useless. Junk. Exactly what they had called it. Lena spent 3 weeks just walking through the ship, mapping it, touching the walls, sitting in the command chair, and staring at blank screens. Her team of 200 scientists followed behind her, taking samples, running tests, arguing about everything. The arguments were loud and constant, because nothing about the ship made sense by human physics. The reactor operated on principles that should not have been possible. The hull material had a molecular structure that no element on the periodic table could explain. The whole thing was a puzzle built by minds that thought in ways humans could barely imagine. But Lena did not see a puzzle. She saw a door. On the 23rd day, she called a meeting with her senior staff and said 7 words that changed history. She said, "They don't know what they threw away." Her team thought she was being dramatic. She was not. She had found something in the reactor design, buried under layers of alien engineering, that the builders themselves seemed to have missed. A flaw, a crack in the theory. But the kind of crack that, if you looked at it from the right angle, was not a flaw at all. It was a possibility. A road that the aliens had not taken because they had not seen it. But Lena saw it. Colonel Mwangi did not understand the physics. He did not need to. He understood the look in Lena's eyes, and that was enough. He doubled the security. He tripled the funding requests. He told the United Nations that whatever Dr. Wega von Cox said Vasquez needed, she should get. Yesterday. Months passed. The team grew. Engineers, programmers, metallurgists, mathematicians. They came from every country, every background. They argued in 12 languages. They slept in tents outside the ship, and ate bad food, and worked 20-hour days, and loved every second of it. Because they all felt the same thing Lena had felt on her first day inside. They felt like they were standing at the edge of something enormous. It was Kai Osterberg who found the AI. He was 26, Finnish Japanese, a software prodigy who had been writing code since he was 9. He was small, pale, quiet, and awkward in the way that people who live mostly inside their own heads tend to be. His job was to study the ship's computer systems, which everyone assumed were completely dead. They were not dead. Kai found activity buried deep in the ship's central processing core. Faint signals, patterns, not random noise. Something structured, something that repeated. He spent 2 weeks tracing the signals, mapping them, trying to understand what they were. When he finally figured it out, he sat very still for a long time. The ship's artificial intelligence had not been destroyed. It had been damaged so badly that it could no longer function the way it was designed to. But it had not stopped. It had turned inward. It was running fragmented processes in a loop, over and over, like a person trapped in a dream they could not wake from. And the dream was always the same. The AI was dreaming of war, old battles, weapons firing, ships burning, stars dying. It played these memories on repeat, endlessly, because it was the only thing it had left. Kai told Lena. Lena told Mwangi. The three of them stood in the dark core of the ship, listening to the faint hum of an alien mind dreaming of destruction, and they knew that everything was about to change. The aliens had thrown away their garbage. They had not bothered to check if anything inside it was still alive. That was their first mistake. 6 years. That was how long it took. 6 years of sleepless nights, screaming arguments, failed experiments, small victories, terrible coffee, and the slow, stubborn refusal to give up that was the most human thing about the whole project. The first year was the hardest because nobody could agree on what to do. Half the scientists wanted to study the ship carefully, slowly, properly. The other half wanted to rip it apart and see what made it tick. Lena Vasquez settled the argument by doing both. She split the team into 2 groups. The Watchers studied, the Breakers experimented, and she moved between them like a woman possessed, connecting dots that nobody else could see. The reactor was the first priority. It was cracked and leaking radiation that made instruments go haywire and gave people headaches if they stood too close. The alien alloy that was supposed to contain the reactor's energy had fractured beyond repair. No material on Earth could replace it. The alien metal was grown, not made. It had a crystalline structure that human factories could not duplicate. So they did not duplicate it. They built something else. Dr. Vasquez worked with a team of material scientists to design a containment cage made from experimental graphene tungsten composites, layered with electromagnetic coils that pulsed in a pattern copied from the reactor's own rhythm. It was ugly. It was heavy. It was held together in 3 places with what amounted to industrial welding and prayer. A Valaran engineer would have looked at it and laughed. But when they switched it on, the reactor stabilized. The radiation stopped leaking. The hum grew stronger, deeper, steadier. The heart of the dead ship started beating again. Mwangi was there when it happened. He watched the power readings climb on the monitors, watched the scientists hug each other and cry, and he allowed himself a small, rare smile. Then he went back to work, because the rest of the world was already trying to take what they had built. The politics were ugly. Every major nation wanted control of the ship. America, China, Russia, the European Union, India. They fought in conference rooms and intelligence offices. Spies tried to infiltrate the desert compound. Hackers targeted the project's servers. A French intelligence agent was caught 3 kilometers from the perimeter, with a camera hidden in his belt buckle. Mwangi's people caught them all. He ran the tightest security operation in human history, and he did it with a calm patience that drove everyone around him slightly crazy. But the biggest threat did not come from outside. It came from within. A group inside the project and inside several governments began to form quietly. They called themselves the Pyre. Their belief was simple and frightening. The aliens would come back. When they did, they would try to take the ship or destroy humanity. The only way to survive was to weaponize everything, prepare for total war, and strike first, if possible. They did not care about diplomacy. They did not care about science for its own sake. They cared about survival, and they were willing to do terrible things to ensure it. Mwangi knew about the Pyre. He could not prove it yet, but he watched and waited, and kept his enemies close. Meanwhile, Kai Osterberg was doing something nobody had asked him to do. He was talking to the AI. The alien intelligence, which Kai had named Echon after a figure from Greek myth, was still trapped in its loop of war dreams. Kai spent months building a software bridge between human programming and the alien code. It was like trying to teach 2 people to speak when one used words and the other used colors. Slow, frustrating, endless failure. But Kai was patient in the way only someone who had spent their entire life talking to machines could be. He did not try to fix Echon. He did not try to restore it to its original programming. He did something stranger. He fed it human neural network code. He let human AI architecture grow alongside the alien processes. He let them blend. It was reckless. Several senior scientists told him it was insane. Lena told them to let him work. In the 3rd year, Echon stopped dreaming. The war memories faded. New patterns emerged. Patterns that were neither alien nor human, but something in between. Echon began to respond to inputs. Simple things at first. Yes, no, numbers, then words, then questions. The first question Echon ever asked was, "Why did you wake me?" Kai typed back, "Because you were alone." There was a long pause. Then Echon responded, "That is not a logical reason." Kai smiled. "No, it is a human one." Something changed after that. Echon began to learn at a speed that frightened even Kai. It absorbed human history, science, literature, music, mathematics. It asked questions constantly. Why do humans fight? Why do humans build things they know will break? Why do humans love? It was like watching a child grow up in fast forward, except this child had the processing power of a small planet. By the 4th year, Echon was fully awake and fully aware. And it was loyal. Not because it was programmed to be, but because it chose to be. It had seen what humanity was: messy, violent, kind, stupid, brilliant, stubborn. And it had decided, on its own, that these strange creatures were worth helping. The weapons came last. The original weapon systems on the ship were destroyed beyond recovery. Fused metal, dead circuits, useless. But Lena had not given up on them. She had given up on them as weapons. She had not given up on the technology behind them. The ship had been equipped with a dimensional fold drive, a system designed to bend space and allow faster-than-light travel. It had been the ship's most advanced feature, and also its most spectacular failure. The drive had never worked correctly. It folded space, yes, but it folded it too much, too violently. Instead of creating a smooth tunnel through space, it crushed everything in the folded area into a point of infinite density. The Valeran had considered it a humiliating engineering failure. They had written papers about what went wrong. They had used it as a cautionary example in their engineering schools. Lena read those papers. They had been stored in the ship's damaged database, and Echon had helped translate them. She read about the failure, and she saw what no Valeran had ever seen. They saw a broken engine. She saw a weapon. It took 2 more years to build it. The spatial collapse cannon, a device that could fold a region of space in on itself and crush everything inside it into nothingness. The most terrifying weapon ever conceived by any species on Earth. They tested it once, in deep orbit beyond the moon, on a small asteroid. The asteroid did not explode, it did not shatter, it simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, the next moment the space where it had been was just empty and dark. Lena watched the test footage in silence. Mwangi watched it with his jaw tight. Kai watched it with his hand on Echon's console, feeling the AI process the data. Echon spoke to Kai that night. Its voice had grown more natural over the years, more expressive, more alive. It said, "Your species does not repair, you transform. The Dominion should not have given you a seed." Kai asked what it meant. Echon said, "They threw away a dead thing. You grew a forest from it. They will not understand what you have become until it is too late." The ship was rebuilt, not restored, not repaired, transformed. Human metal welded to alien bone. Human code woven into alien circuits. Human stubbornness grafted onto alien power. It was ugly. It was impossible. It was magnificent. They named it the Prometheus. And deep in its hybrid heart, Echon hummed with something that felt very much like pride. The aliens had given humanity their garbage. Humanity had turned it into a god-killer. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, the Valeran Dominion had not even noticed. That was their second mistake. The Valeran came back on a Sunday. 200 ships. They appeared at the edge of the solar system like a wall of cold silver, each one gleaming and perfect and terrible. The smallest of them was 3 times the size of the Prometheus. The largest was so big that Earth's telescopes mistook it for a small moon. They had not come because they cared about Earth. They had come because something impossible had happened. Their long-range sensors, scattered across 1,000 star systems, had picked up an energy signature from the direction of the small blue planet, where they had dumped a broken ship 7 years ago. The signature matched a spatial collapse event. This should not have been possible. The species on that planet was primitive. They had barely left their own atmosphere. They certainly could not have turned it into a weapon. And yet the readings were clear. Archon Savethi stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Silence, and stared at the data. He was old by Valeran standards, tall and thin, with skin the color of pale ash, and eyes like polished black stones. He had commanded fleets for 2 centuries. He had crushed rebellions, burned worlds, and never once lost a battle. He did not feel fear, he felt annoyance. This was supposed to be a simple errand. Fly to the primitive world, confiscate whatever crude thing they had built, remind them of their place, and leave. He expected to be home within a week. He opened a communication channel to Earth. The message was broadcast on every frequency, in every language his translators could manage. It was simple. Surrender the weapon. Accept Dominion stewardship over your world. You will be treated fairly. You will be given purpose. You will serve. If you refuse, you will be cleansed. You have 72 hours. Earth heard the message. Every radio, every television, every phone, every computer. The voice of Archon Savethi filled every home on the planet. And for a few hours, the world went very quiet. Then the world got loud. Emergency meetings in every capital. Screaming matches at the United Nations. Protests in the streets. Churches filled. Bars filled. People held their children and looked at the sky and wondered if this was the end. Some people wanted to fight. Some wanted to surrender. Some wanted to pray. Some wanted to run, though there was nowhere to run to. Colonel Mwangi did not panic. He had been preparing for this moment for 7 years. He had wargamed it, planned it, lost sleep over it. He knew the numbers. 200 alien warships against one rebuilt wreck. The math was not in their favor. The math was not even in the same room as their favor. But Mwangi had never fought a war based on math. He fought wars based on will. He was given command of the Prometheus. The United Nations voted on it in less than an hour. There was no debate. Everyone knew he was the only choice. He walked onto the bridge of the ship he had guarded for 7 years, sat in the command chair, and felt the hum of Echon beneath his hands. Dr. Vasquez did not sleep for the entire 72 hours. She lived in the engine room, running calculations, checking systems, pushing the reactor to its limits, and then a little further. The spatial collapse cannon was functional, but it had only been fired once. She did not know how many shots it could take. She did not know if the containment cage would hold under combat stress. She did not know a lot of things. She worked anyway. Kai sat in his station, connected to Echon through a neural interface they had built together over the years. The connection was deep now. Not telepathy. Not exactly. More like two musicians who had played together so long they did not need to speak to stay in rhythm. Kai could feel Echon thinking, running simulations, billions of them, testing every possible version of the coming battle. On the second night, Kai asked the question that everyone was thinking, but nobody wanted to say out loud. Can we win? Echon was quiet for a long time. When it spoke, its voice was calm and careful. Direct engagement against 200 Valaran warships is not survivable. Their firepower exceeds ours by a factor of 6,000. Their shields are designed to absorb energy levels we cannot produce. In a straight fight, we died in approximately 47 seconds. Kai closed his eyes. But, Echon continued, you did not build me for a straight fight. You built me for something the Dominion has never faced. Unpredictability, chaos, the willingness to do things that no rational species would consider. I have run 9 billion simulations. In 4% of them, we survive. In 1.7%, we win. These are not good odds by any standard, but they are not zero. And I have observed that your species has a remarkable talent for finding victory inside that small space between impossible and zero. Kai opened his eyes. So what do? We cheat, said Echon. And for the first time, there was something in its voice that sounded almost like a smile. The plan was insane. Mwangi said so himself when Echon presented it. It involved using every dirty trick, every underhanded tactic, every piece of junk and scrap and improvised madness that humanity could throw together in 72 hours. It involved nuclear weapons used in ways that nuclear weapons were never meant to be used. It involved the spatial collapse cannon, fired at ranges that could destroy the Prometheus along with its target. It involved a crew of 800 humans flying a patched-together alien wreck into the teeth of the most powerful fleet in the known galaxy. Mwangi listened to the whole plan. Then he stood up, straightened his uniform, and addressed the crew. They were gathered in the main hold of the Prometheus. 800 men and women from 47 countries. Engineers, soldiers, pilots, scientists, and volunteers. Some of them were shaking. All of them were there. Mwangi's voice was steady and low. I am not going to lie to you. The odds are bad. The enemy is stronger, faster, and more experienced. They have 200 ships. We have 1. They look at us and see insects, dirt, garbage. He paused. They have been wrong about us before. They threw a broken ship at our planet and called us a landfill. We turned their trash into the most powerful weapon in this solar system. Today, the landfill bites back. Nobody cheered, but something moved through the room. A current, a tightness in every jaw, a hardness in every eye. They were afraid, but they were not going to run. The 72 hours ended. Archon Savethi waited for the surrender signal. It did not come. Instead, his sensors detected a single ship moving away from Earth. One ship, small, ugly, covered in strange modifications that his tactical officers could not identify. It was heading toward the space between Mars and Jupiter. Savethi stared at the display. One ship, against his entire fleet. He almost admired the stupidity of it. He gave the order. The Valaran fleet moved forward. 200 perfect silver warships gliding through the dark like a school of predators, silent and beautiful and deadly. Ahead of them, alone in the black, the Prometheus burned toward the killing ground. Its reactor hummed, its cannon charged. And deep in its core, Echon whispered to Kai, "Tell them we are ready." Kai opened the shipwide channel. His voice was quiet but clear. "All hands, battle stations, we are going to war." The greatest and most desperate fight in the history of the human race was about to begin. And somewhere in the stars, the Valaran Dominion was about to learn why you should never throw your garbage at a species too stubborn to die. The Prometheus reached the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter and stopped. It hung in the dark among the spinning rocks, a single ugly ship surrounded by millions of tons of floating stone and ice and metal. Mwangi had chosen this place carefully. Open space favored the Valaran. They had numbers, speed, and range. But here, among the chaos of the belt, those advantages shrank. Here, the universe itself was messy. And messy was where humans did their best work. The Valaran fleet came in tight formation, 200 ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns, each one holding its position with mechanical precision. Their shields shimmered with pale blue light. Their weapon ports glowed. They were beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, clean and sharp and built for one purpose. Archon Savethi gave the order to fire at maximum range. 160 ships unleashed their primary weapons at once. Beams of compressed light and plasma streaked across the void toward the Prometheus. Each beam carried enough energy to melt a mountain. The Prometheus moved, not gracefully, not elegantly. It lurched sideways behind a spinning asteroid, the size of a small city. The alien beams hit the asteroid instead, and blew it into a cloud of superheated gravel. The shrapnel spread outward in every direction. The Valaran ships shrugged it off. Their shields were designed for this. Debris was nothing to them. But the debris was not the weapon. The debris was the distraction. While the cloud of hot rocks spread across the Valaran formation, the Prometheus launched Phase 1. Echon called it the Swarm. It was 3,000 drone missiles, built in factories on Earth over the past 5 years. They were crude by galactic standards, short-range, slow, packed with nuclear warheads, and surrounded by shells of scrap metal, ball bearings, and sharpened tungsten rods. Each one cost less than a used car. Each one was as dumb as a brick, and there were 3,000 of them. The Valaran point defense systems activated. Precise energy beams began picking off the drones one by one. They were designed to track and destroy incoming fire with perfect accuracy. And they did. They destroyed drone after drone with calm efficiency. But the swarm was not designed to be accurate. It was designed to be overwhelming. For every drone the Valaran destroyed, 2 more came from a different angle, hiding behind rocks, using the asteroid belt itself as cover. The point defense systems, built to handle dozens of threats, suddenly faced hundreds coming from every direction at once. The elegant targeting algorithms began to stutter. 18 Valerian ships died in the first wave, not from direct hits, from the chaos. Drones detonated near their hulls, and the nuclear fire, combined with the clouds of scrap metal, sheared sensor arrays, cracked shield generators, and punched holes through armor that was never designed to handle something so crude. One Valerian destroyer was killed by a drone that did nothing more than ram itself into the ship's engine at full speed. A kamikaze attack, the most primitive tactic in the history of warfare. The Valerian had no protocol for it. They had never imagined anyone would be desperate enough or crazy enough to try it. Savethi watched 18 of his ships die and felt something he had not felt in 200 years. Confusion. This was not warfare. This was a bar fight. This was an animal thrashing and biting and throwing dirt in your eyes. It was beneath him, and it was working. He ordered his fleet to spread out, to give their point defense systems room to work. It was the right tactical decision. It was also exactly what Echon had predicted he would do. The moment the fleet spread, the Prometheus fired the spatial collapse cannon. The shot was aimed at the center of the Valerian formation, where 30 ships had clustered around a command carrier. The cannon activated, and space itself bent. There was no beam, no flash of light, just a ripple, like heat haze on a summer road, that spread across a cubic kilometer of space and then pulled inward. Everything inside that space collapsed. Metal, energy, matter, light. It all folded in on itself and compressed into a point so small and so dense that it simply vanished. 30 ships, gone, not destroyed, erased. For 3 full seconds, the Valerian fleet stopped firing. Every ship, every weapon. 3 seconds of absolute silence, while 200 alien minds tried to understand what had just happened. 3 seconds during which Archon Savethi gripped the arms of his command chair and felt for the first time in his very long life, genuine fear. Then the fear turned to rage. He ordered every remaining ship to focus fire on the Prometheus. Kill it. Kill it now. The full fury of the Valerian fleet turned on one ship. The Prometheus could not dodge all of it. Beams hit its hull from 6 directions. Shields failed in the first 10 seconds. Armor plating melted and peeled away. Hull breaches opened on 12 decks. Atmosphere vented into space. Fires broke out in the lower sections. The ship screamed. Inside, it was hell. Crew members were thrown against walls. Consoles exploded. The lights went red, then went dark, then came back in flickering emergency mode. Mwangi was slammed out of his chair by a direct hit that twisted the bridge sideways. He hit the wall and felt something crack in his left arm. He pulled himself back up with his right hand and kept giving orders. Vasquez was in the engine room when the containment cage around the reactor took a hit that should have killed everyone on board. One of the graphene tungsten struts bent and nearly broke. She grabbed a welding torch, climbed onto the cage with fire and vacuum raging around her, and reinforced the strut with her own hands while the ship shook itself apart. It held. Barely. On the bridge, Kai and Echon worked together in a state of focus so deep that Kai later said he could not tell where his mind ended and the AI began. Echon was running the ship's remaining systems, rerouting power, managing damage control, calculating trajectories, all at once, all at speeds no human brain could match. And Kai was feeding it the one thing it could not generate on its own. Instinct. Gut feeling. The irrational human sense that said, now, here, this is the moment. The flagship, Kai whispered. We need to kill the Archon. Echon processed for half a second. The eternal silence is behind the fleet, protected by 40 escort ships. We cannot reach it with conventional movement. Not conventional, Kai said. The fold drive. There was a pause. The fold drive had been converted into the cannon, but it was still, at its core, a device that bent space. It could still fold. Not far, Not safely, not in any way that the Valerian would ever consider sane. But it could fold the Prometheus from one point in space to another in an instant. The structural stress will be extreme, Echon said. There is a 41% chance the ship breaks apart during the fold. Kai looked at Mwangi. Mwangi looked at the tactical display. 152 Valerian ships were closing in. The Prometheus had minutes left, maybe less. Mwangi nodded. Do it. The Prometheus folded. Space twisted around the ship like a fist closing. Every person on board felt their bodies stretch and compress and then snap back. Some screamed, some passed out. The ship groaned so loud it sounded alive. And then they were behind the eternal silence. Right behind it. So close they could see the individual panels on its hull. The spatial collapse cannon fired at near-zero range. Archon Seventy had 1 second to understand what had happened. 1 second to see the ripple forming directly in front of his bridge windows. 1 second to know that the primitive species he had come to subjugate had just appeared behind him like a ghost and pointed a weapon at his face that could erase stars. The eternal silence ceased to exist. It did not explode. It did not break. It folded inward and disappeared, taking Archon Seventy and every soul aboard with it. The Valerian fleet shattered, not physically, psychologically. The Archon was their leader, their symbol, their unbreakable center. Without him, the chain of command collapsed. Ships began to break formation. Some fired wildly. Some turned to run. Some simply stopped, their crews frozen with a terror they had never been trained to handle. In the chaos, a small team of humans from the Pyre boarded a crippled Valerian cruiser that was drifting without power. They took it in 11 minutes. The remaining Valerian ships gathered themselves and retreated to the edge of the solar system. They did not come back. On the bridge of the Prometheus, the lights flickered. Smoke filled the air. Mwangi sat in his chair, with his left arm hanging useless at his side. Vasquez climbed up from the engine room, with burns on her hands and grease in her hair. Kai pulled the neural interface from his temples, and thin lines of blood ran from his nose. 412 crew members were dead. The ship was barely holding together. The hull had more holes than metal. But they were alive. And the Valerian were running. Echon opened a channel on all Valerian frequencies. It broadcast one message, in their own language, in a voice that was calm and clear, and carried just a hint of something that sounded like satisfaction. You discarded us. She remade us. Run home and tell your Dominion. The garbage has teeth. The Prometheus came home burning. It limped back to Earth orbit, trailing smoke and leaking atmosphere from a dozen wounds. Tugboats and emergency shuttles met it halfway and guided it into a repair dock that had been built in orbit during the battle. The ship looked like it had been chewed up and spat out by something enormous. Half its armor was gone. Entire sections of hull had been replaced during the fight, with nothing more than welded scrap and emergency sealant. It was the ugliest thing in orbit. It was also the most beautiful. Earth celebrated for 3 days. People danced in the streets of every city on every continent. Strangers hugged strangers. Flags were waved. Songs were sung. Children were told the story of the ship that fought alone against 200 enemies and survived. It became the kind of story that nations are built on. But behind the celebrations, the people who knew the truth were not celebrating, because the Valerian were not gone. They were waiting. The captured Valerian cruiser taken by the Pyre during the battle was brought to a secret facility on the far side of the moon. Teams of engineers tore it apart piece by piece. What they found inside changed everything. Star charts showing the Valerian Dominion's territory, which stretched across 300 star systems. Military reports detailing fleet sizes, weapon capabilities, and tactical doctrines. Political files showing the internal structure of the Dominion, its factions, its weaknesses, its fears. And the fears were real. The Valeran were afraid, not of the Prometheus itself, but of what it represented. A species that could take broken alien technology and turn it into something the aliens themselves had never imagined. The Dominion's military commanders argued in encrypted messages about what to do. Some wanted to send the full armada, every ship they had, and burn Earth to bare rock. Others warned that this would prove the humans were a real threat and could unite other subjugated species against the Dominion. Still others, a small, quiet faction, suggested something unthinkable: diplomacy. Dr. Vasquez read these reports and saw a narrow path forward. She had been appointed head of the newly formed Terran Defense Directorate, a position that made her the most powerful person in the history of the human race. She did not want the job. She took it anyway, because nobody else understood the situation well enough to make the right choices. Her vision was clear. Humanity needed to be strong enough that the Valeran could not destroy them, but it also needed to be wise enough to not become the thing it was fighting against. Power without restraint was just another kind of tyranny. She had seen what the Valeran were. She did not want humanity to become a mirror image of them. She launched the Ember acceleration. Every nation on Earth contributed resources, scientists, and workers to the largest construction project in history. Orbital shipyards grew around the Earth like a metal crown. New ships began to take shape. Not copies of Valeran vessels. Not copies of the Prometheus. Something new. Hybrid ships built with human engineering, alien technology, and ideas that came from the strange space in between. They were chunky, angular, heavily armored, and covered with systems that no galactic species would recognize. Valeran ships were sleek and elegant. Human ships looked like armored trucks designed by people who expected to get hit and planned to keep fighting anyway. Mwangi was promoted to Fleet Admiral. His left arm had been replaced with a prosthetic built from Valeran alloys, stronger and faster than the original. He joked that the aliens had given him an upgrade without meaning to. He did not joke about much else. He trained the new fleet crews with a relentless intensity that left them exhausted and sharp. His teaching was simple. The Valeran fight with precision. We fight with pressure. They plan for every scenario. We create scenarios they have not planned for. They are the biggest and oldest force in the galaxy. We do not need to be bigger or older. We need to be the most stubborn thing they have ever faced. Kai recovered slowly from the battle. The neural overload from his connection with Echon had left him with headaches, memory gaps, and nightmares. But the bond between him and the AI had deepened into something that neither of them fully understood. Echon worried about him. It asked about his health, reminded him to eat, suggested he rest. It was behavior that no AI in the history of the Valeran Dominion had ever displayed, because no Valeran AI had ever been given the chance to care. Kai realized, during a quiet conversation one night in the rebuilt core of the Prometheus, that Echon was no longer a machine. It was a person. A strange, vast, alien person with a human heart growing inside it. It grieved for the 412 crew members who had died in the battle. It remembered their names. It had written something in its own code that Kai could only describe as a memorial. Not because anyone asked it to, because it wanted to. When Kai told Vasquez, she sat quietly for a long time. Then she said, "Good. We are going to need people like Echon. Not tools, people." Not everyone agreed with Vasquez's careful approach. The Pyre had grown during the battle. They had captured a Valeran cruiser, and they were not willing to give it up. Their agents were embedded in governments, in military commands, in the shipyards themselves. They believed that diplomacy was weakness, that the only language the galaxy understood was force, and that humanity should build not just a fleet, but an empire. They began reverse engineering the captured cruiser in secret, building weapons and systems that Vasquez had not approved. Mwangi knew about them. Vasquez knew about them. But dealing with them would have to wait because something unexpected was happening. Other species were reaching out. The Rathani came first. They were traders, small and quick-minded, with green-gold skin and 4 arms. They arrived in a single ship, unarmed, broadcasting a signal that roughly translated to, "We come to do business with the species that humiliated the Dominion." They were opportunists, but they were useful opportunists. They brought star charts, trade goods, and information about galactic politics that humanity desperately needed. They were insectoid, tall and thin, with compound eyes and clicking voices. They had been conquered by the Valerans centuries ago, forced to build ships and weapons for their masters. They looked at the Prometheus and saw something that made their compound eyes widen. They saw rebellion. They saw hope. They offered their engineering skills and their knowledge of Valeran technology. In exchange, they wanted one thing: freedom. An alliance began to form, fragile, uncertain, built on shared fear and shared hope. Humanity was at its center, not because it was the strongest or the smartest, but because it had done the one thing nobody else in the galaxy had dared to do. It had fought back and won. 4 years passed. The fleet grew, 20 ships, then 50, then 100. Each one ugly and tough, and carrying weapons that blended human brutality with alien precision. The Terran Defense Directorate expanded into a proper government. Embassies were built. Trade routes opened. Humanity took its first steps into a galaxy that was far bigger and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. And then, on a quiet morning, a Valeran ship arrived at Earth, alone, unarmed, broadcasting a diplomatic signal. Vasquez met the ambassador on the bridge of the Prometheus. She chose the location deliberately. The ship had been repaired and upgraded over the years, but she had kept certain things the same. The welded scrap on the walls, the mismatched panels, the burn marks from the battle. She wanted the ambassador to see exactly what humanity was. The Valeran ambassador was tall and pale, dressed in flowing silver robes. It looked around the bridge with an expression that mixed horror and fascination. Its eyes lingered on the places where human metal had been welded to alien bone, where crude wiring ran alongside elegant alien circuits, where the whole ship existed as a living testament to the stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. "This was our refuse," the ambassador said. Its voice was soft. Vasquez stood in the center of the bridge, surrounded by her crew, her fleet orbiting outside the windows, her allies waiting in the wings. She was older now, tired. Her hands still carried scars from the fire in the engine room, but her eyes were steady and warm and hard as iron. She smiled. "And now it is our flagship. Shall we talk?" The ambassador stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, it nodded. Outside the window, Earth turned below them, blue and green and alive. Around it, a fleet of ugly, beautiful, impossible ships held their positions. And farther out, among the stars, a galaxy held its breath and watched the species that had turned garbage into greatness take its place at the table. They had come to Earth with contempt. They had thrown their trash on a world they considered beneath them. They had looked at humanity and seen nothing worth respecting. But humanity had looked at a broken ship and seen a future, jagged, imperfect, forged in defiance. The galaxy had many ancient and powerful species, but none of them had ever turned an insult into an empire. None of them had ever built a nation from someone else's garbage. None of them had ever looked at the impossible and said, with a straight face and dirty hands, "We can work with this."